Hi, my name is Amanda, and I'm an aspiring health coach. I'm also a psychiatric survivor with at least 5 different mental disorders on record. So I've decided to do a deep dive into health and wellness topics in preparation for becoming a health coach so that I can specialize in helping people get off and stay off psychiatric medications. I've been medication free for the most part for the last 15 years, and I think it's one of the most important decisions that I could have ever made regarding my health and the rest of my life. So with that in mind, I want to talk about the latest popular diet craze, the ketogenic diet, as it relates to mental health and mental illness. One of the diagnoses that I have incurred is bipolar disorder, and when I was medicated, which was for a period of time for most of my 20s. So for reference, I'm 43 now, and went off meds when I was about 30. So one of my goals health-wise is to make my brain invulnerable to these highs and lows of manias and depressions. I no longer tell people that I have bipolar disorder or that I am bipolar, because I believe that the genesis of mine and the genesis of most people's bipolar disorder is actually iatrogenic harm from antidepressants. So there's a wonderful book if you're interested in learning more about why I think that about bipolar disorder. There's a book called Anatomy of an Epidemic by a man named Robert Whitaker. Now that was written several years ago, probably in 2007, 2008. I don't have it right here with me for reference, but Robert Whitaker is a journalist who uncovered a lot of corruption in the pharmaceutical industry, and according to his research, his stats indicate that 85% of people with bipolar disorder were exposed to either marijuana or antidepressants while their brain was still developing. And it wasn't really talked about at the time that I was diagnosed, and it certainly wasn't investigated, but when I was 16, I did have an adverse reaction to Prozac. So, and it wasn't framed as such, and I recognize it now, but my doctors were not acknowledging of it, nor did they acknowledge that there could be any kind of consequences out of that. So that is part of why I have a passion and commitment to helping people live the healthiest life that they can live without medication. It's simply because I believe that most of these medications, whether it's antidepressants, antipsychotics, mood stabilizers, stimulants, most of the drugs created to treat mental illness actually harm the body and create more damage to the brain of the people that are seeking help. So that said, what do I think about this ketogenic diet as a proposed solution to, I've seen it proposed as a solution to bipolar disorder, schizoaffective disorder, schizophrenia. They're doing a lot of clinical trials now. It's all over my YouTube feed, and more generally as a weight loss diet, it has been propagated for, I wouldn't say almost a decade now, but it seems to be unstoppable, and it also seems to be disturbingly normalized and mainstreamed, in the sense that there's not a lot of critical pushback. I feel like there was more critical pushback from dietitians and doctors a few years ago, and something has tilted the scale. So on social media, it just feels to me like we are living through this incredible pro-keto moment. And it has also been touted as a solution for autoimmune disorders and popularized by people like Mikhaila Peterson. And I deeply respect the narratives and testimonials of people like Mikhaila Peterson. So I want to get that out there, that I respect the lived experience of people who have tried that, or even the more extreme diets, the carnivore diet, the lion diet, like Mikhaila Peterson, and had a remission of some serious autoimmune disorder. I've also been following an influencer with schizoaffective disorder in her trial of the ketogenic diet, and she seems to portray that she's had remarkable remission, which is wonderful. And I'm glad for anybody who wants to try to taper off meds or use a diet as an alternative to meds. You are welcome to do that. I am not I'm not opposed to that or wanting to rain on anyone's parade here. I'm just going to explain my hesitation, my reservations about the diet, given that I have bipolar disorder symptoms that arise. It's very difficult for me I wanted to say that I had conquered my disorder, but then when I really sat down and thought about it, I drew up a timeline of all the years that I've been off meds, and I say that I believe I've conquered it in the sense that I have lived a pretty good, successful life without medication for it, and have had to put up with eruptions of mania or eruptions of depression or bouts with depression, while still being self-sufficient, self-sustaining, and trying to achieve life goals. So, but then there came a point in time where that wasn't good enough for me. That's only recently. So I decided to throw myself at the medical community, including the functional medical community, alternative healers, and also to get every data point that I could possibly about my own internal metabolic states. So I have had to drive this process of getting things like organic acids tests, chem panels, being tested for nutrient deficiencies, being tested for exogenous toxins like heavy metals, just to get a complete comprehensive picture of what my health is at this point in my life, period, end of story. Now, beyond that, I have started seeing a functional medical doctor through Index Health Services, and actually fully disclosed and opened up with the aim of, can you help me prevent the future recurrence of manias or depressions? Because my hesitation to do that in years prior has been derived from the fact that I feel that in a conventional medical setting with a conventional GP, if I come to them and I complain of subclinical symptoms, say I feel that as a person I generally experience wide swings in my basic energy levels. So without discussing mood, emotion, affect, behavior, what have you, I feel that sometimes I go through periods of very low energy followed by periods of rather high energy without it even necessarily approaching mania, but I feel like there's something going on in my basic energy production processes, i.e. metabolism. So this is why I'm intrigued by metabolic psychiatry, but I have some very strong points of hesitation. So the dietary changes that have been recommended to me without this doctor having seen test results on our initial consultation from looking at a rather thorough intake of health history this doctor recommended that I drop all dairy and gluten-containing foods from my diet, which at first I was like, oh yeah, sure, okay, cool. I already was planning to drop sugar because I experience sugar as pain entering my body, and I love sugar, but I have very bad joint and arthritis pain. So I have spent the last couple of weeks running experiments, and I will talk more about that. But at no point was it suggested to me that I do the ketogenic diet by anyone other than social media and influence. So let's bear that in mind. But, and I have been watching all of this unfold with this like inner grimace. Like it makes me cringe, frankly. It makes me cringe. And why is that? Part of it is because when I became a personal trainer, I was very conditioned. You can use the word educated, you can use the word indoctrinated, to favor high protein diets for the purposes of putting on muscle and maintaining a specific physique body composition. Now, I've said before in previous videos that the point of this deep dive exploratory process is to kind of break me of that dogmatic paradigm of viewing health solely in terms of body composition, because it's not enough, and that would be inaccurate. It's not complete. It's not a complete enough picture. So I will say that the farther along I get in this process, the more it makes me want to say, okay, I'm going to create a terminal endpoint, and then I'm going to be so glad to just go back to being a regular gym rat fitness chick. I mean, I have never been so more gung-ho about just doing bodybuilding, because even as complicated as some people think people's macros are, it's like, no, it's not this craziness. It just doesn't. It just feels like home to me, and I just want to go back home. I don't want to do this anymore. But I'm making myself so. So why am I disturbed about the ketogenic diet being proposed as a solution for or a treatment for bipolar disorder? I think that it boils down to a couple of things. It's always problematic for me when the general public gets exposed to ideas about mental illness that I think deviate and get us away from discussions of the psychiatric malpractice that's going on. So I watched most of a podcast by Dr. Andrew Huberman, where he was interviewing Dr. Chris Palmer, who's one of the main progenitors of metabolic psychiatry. He's a psychiatrist out of Harvard Medical School, who is one of the forerunners of the treating bipolar and schizophrenic people with this diet. And Dr. Palmer actually did say at one point something very important that's getting completely submerged in all of this social media coverage of the ketogenic diet. And what he said was, it is important that we not draw inferences about root causes from effective treatments. In other words, if you deprive a person of enough carbohydrates enough that you throw their entire metabolic functioning systems onto ketone bodies as opposed to glucose as a primary fuel. In other words, if you create low blood sugar for sustained periods of time, enough that you create this cascade of completely wildly abnormal metabolic conditions within the human organism, you will see radical and positive effects. You will see symptoms get reduced to nothing, but you can't automatically conclude from that schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder and bipolar disorder and the whole other things are caused by bad metabolisms. However, that is exactly how the coverage is playing out. And for me, anything that distracts from iatrogenic harm and the level of that is going to cause me to have like emotional triggers. It's just going to make me a little bit pissed off, to be honest with you. If you want to know my true hot take on the whole thing, I think that the incidence of this, what's been touted as a health crisis, mental health crisis, an epidemic rise in mental illness